Motivated purely by greed and the drive for profit maximization, these companies ruthlessly plunder the natural resources and grab the ancestral lands of indigenous peoples with no respect for humanity or for the natural environment. In its latest report on attacks on environmental and land defenders, the organization Global Witness revealed that indigenous communities are particularly highly exposed, with over a third of all fatal attacks targeting indigenous people. This is happening across the globe, despite the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples and national legislations that protects the rights of indigenous peoples to maintain their culture and way of life, access to their ancestral lands, and to determine their development priorities. PCFS has been proud to work alongside IPMSDL over the past years in our campaigns for the rights of peasants and indigenous peoples, pro-people development, and for food sovereignty. Together, we have celebrated our victories, such as the pullout of the Chinese land-grabbing company Heng Fu Group Sugar Industry in Preah Vihear, Cambodia, after years of joint campaigning. And we have grieved together when activists and land defenders have been martyred for simply protecting their land, as was the case of the Tumandok massacre in the Philippines in December 2019. IPMSDL is a staunch ally in the fight for just, equitable, healthy and sustainable food systems, being one of our co-organizers at the Global Peoples Summit on Food Systems that concluded last September. PCF stands with you and indigenous people everywhere who are struggling for their right to their ancestral lands and self-determination, as we move forward together to advance our struggle against repression and exploitation, and to end capitalist plunder. Long live the Indigenous Peoples movement for self-determination and liberation. Long live international solidarity.
On this occasion of the 11th year of IPMSDL, in the service of the rights of indigenous peoples across the world, I extend my warmest greetings of international solidarity from the Naga People's Movement for Human Rights. We as indigenous peoples have fought for our rights for self-determination and liberation in our own respective situations as distinct peoples with much struggles and frustrations in many ways. But we have never surrendered our rights, which we owe it to our ancestors. And with the formation of IPMSDL 11 years ago, indigenous peoples' movement across the world have been strengthened, which gave us a collective voice against violations of rights in whichever way and whatever forms. And I take this precious opportunity to express my deepest gratitude to IPMSDL for the support and solidarity extended to me when the government of India prevented me from traveling without any justification or reason. I also take this moment to express my deepest resentment and condemn the terrorist tagging of our Cordillera People's Alliance leaders and comrades in the Philippines with ridiculous frame-up charges. Our support and solidarity also goes to all indigenous leaders who may be going through similar ordeals in different parts of the world. Long live IPMSDL, long live international solidarity.
The International Migrants Alliance, or IMA, the global alliance of grassroots migrants, immigrant, refugee, and displaced people, would like to express our solidarity and deepest congratulations to the 11th anniversary of the IPMSDL. The fight of indigenous people are very dear to the migrant workers. Many of us were indigenous people ourselves, yet we were displaced from our homeland because of the mining, because of the land grabbing, and other kind of neoliberal projects that our own government and the investment are doing. They are grabbing our resources and displacing our people. Many of us become victims of internal migrants and also external migrants. While overseas, we are also struggling to live in dignity as a workers and human. We are heavily exploited. We are treated as slaves in many host countries. In your 11th anniversary, we hope you will continue to inspire many indigenous people to fight for their rights, for their land, for their resources, and for their people. Because it will help all of us, including the migrants, to have a future in our own homeland. Long live IPMSDL, long live the fight of indigenous people, long live international solidarity.
Isang matagumpay at makabayang pagbati sa ika-11 anibersaryo ng IPMSDL. Alam kong sa loob ng 11 taon na pagbibigay ng serbisyo, marami-rami na ang napagtagumpayang mga gawain sa hanay ng mga mamamayang katutubo sa buong bansa at maging sa ibang bansa. At nais ko ring ipaabot ang aking taas kamaong pagpupugay at pagsaludo sa lahat ng mga staff sa walang kapaguran na paggampan sa mga gawain kahit sa gitna ng matinding panggigipit ng Estado. Ang mga tagumpay na ito ay dapat nating depensahan sa pamamagitan ng tuloy-tuloy at sama-samang pagkilos. Mabuhay ang IPMSDL, mabuhay ang mga katutubo at mamamayang nakikibaka. Maraming
We at IPON International congratulate the International Indigenous Peoples Movement for Self-Determination and Liberation on their 11th anniversary. The IPMSDL has made significant contributions in bringing together Indigenous peoples organizations and advocates from all over the world, building solidarity in their struggle for land and self-determination. As we face the catastrophic effects of the climate crisis and a pandemic of the zoonotic disease that is COVID-19, we affirm the Indigenous peoples' struggle for their rights to land and development is intimately linked to the people's fight for climate justice and system change against big corporations and colluding elite state leaders. Now more than ever, we must support the work of indigenous peoples organizations such as IPMSDL, who amplify indigenous peoples' voices and demands in the streets, as well as bring them into key global policy spaces. In the face of state repression and attacks, the IPMSDL has bravely asserted for democratic rights and spaces and carried on with their work with enthusiasm and confidence. We are proud to have worked with the IPMSDL and look forward to more years of working with them in forging international solidarity for building campaigns that advance people's rights, sovereignty, and truly people-centered development.
Magandang araw sa lahat. Greetings sa mga manggagawa na kumakatawan ng staff ng IPMSDL. Pagbati na rin sa mga allies at partners ng organization na ito. And most of all, pagbati sa lahat ng mga katutubong Pilipino. Sa darating na mga panahon, in the coming years, I hope people will realize that when indigenous peoples talk about self-determination, we are not just only talking about ourselves, but we are also talking about all of us, including mga indigenous peoples. So when we talk about safeguarding our common resources like rivers, forests, and trees, we're also thinking about the future of the world, buong sangkatauhan. We're saving the planet from the clutches of capitalism and greed. When we are defending the land, we're defending the land for the sake of the future. We're saving lives instead of saving more cash, instead of more money. And when we insist against mining and all of those destructive resource extraction, we are also affirming the integrity of creation. Mula sa Episcopal Diocese of Central Philippines, pagbati sa inyong lahat. Mabuhay po. Thank you.
My name is Malcolm Guy. I'm very glad to join you today to wish the International Indigenous Peoples Movement for Self-Determination and Liberation, or IPMSDL, a very happy 11th birthday. I represent the International League of People's Struggle, or ILPS for short, a global anti-imperialist and democratic united front linking over 400 mass organizations in 45 countries and territories. The IPMSDL has come a long way since it was established on November 8, 2010. In the context of an international conference on Indigenous peoples' rights, alternatives and solutions to the climate crisis held in Baguio City, Philippines. Right away, the organization signaled its intention to be involved at the heart of the struggles of Indigenous peoples against the devastating impacts of the imperialist-caused climate crisis, and in the search for alternatives and solutions. I was very impressed by the role the IPMSDL played in the meeting halls and in the streets as part of the Southern People's Action at the imperialist-dominated COP26 recently in Glasgow. And we know about climate change here in Canada, or Turtle Island as Indigenous people call it, where torrential rains, flooding and landslides have destroyed roads and rail links, cutting off the major port of Vancouver from the rest of the country, and this following a deadly heat wave and massive forest fires earlier this year. You have been a shining beam of light for us at the International League of People's Struggle during the past 11 years. We look forward to strengthening our links and continuing to work together during the battles to come and the major victories for the world's people we are sure to win together. Long live the International Indigenous Peoples Movement for Self-Determination and Liberation. Long live the solid links between the IPMSDL and the ILPS. Long live international solidarity.
Okay, welcome back. You're still tuned in to the IPMSDL 11th anniversary special here in Indigenous Voices. So those messages were from the People's Coalition on Food Sovereignty, Naga People's Movement for Human Rights, International Migrants Alliance, Bayan Muna Party List, Ibon International, Episcopal Diocese of Central Philippines of the Episcopal Church in the Philippines, and of course, the International League of People's Struggles. We've also got some greetings and messages from our Facebook viewers, so let me read two of them. So from Rafael, he said, defend life, land, and resources. And another one from Gail, she said, happy anniversary IPMSDL, hearts and raised twists. So thank you for those messages. Tune in until later so we'll know who gets the Best Messages Award. So 11 years ago, as the conversations earlier have discussed, IPMSDL was established. So now let's redirect our memories to recall what have been the most memorable campaigns, activities, or engagements of the IPMSDL that followed. So our activities are trainings, research work, we have community visits and exchanges. There are also memorable people and organizations that might have stuck with you. So For this, you can share what is your favorite or your most memorable moment with IPMSDL. So IPMSD has been working on a number of broad advocacies in different regions with different types of networks and alliances, which all intersect in the fight for the right of IP, human rights, and liberation. So, Jitan, would you like to go first if you're ready? Or if you're still thinking about it, racking your brain for your favorite moment, let's go with best time.
Yeah. I have quite a lot actually, especially in the earlier years now, but maybe I'll mention two. Yes, one unforgettable moment for me was in 2012 when there was a contingent of IPMSDL composed of mostly Asians that joined the Karaoke 2. This was a huge gathering of Indigenous peoples. It was held parallel to the Rio Plus 20 or the Earth Summit of the UN. This was held in Brazil. No? There were only a handful of us, IPMSDL contingent, because it was very expensive to travel to the other side of the world. But Celestine was also there, and Jitan was also there. It was a first time for many of us to go to that part of the world, but it was very inspiring to see hundreds and thousands of fellow Indigenous peoples, all in our Indigenous attires, coming together to talk about us, Indigenous peoples, continuing our stewardship of our lands and resources. And it was especially inspiring to see Indigenous peoples from the Amazon area who had to walk 30 days just to join that event. No? So, of course, the IPMSDL had its own event during that time, during the parallel events of the Rio Plus 20. So that's one. And then the second is the World Trade Organization ministerial meeting in Bali, Indonesia in 2013. We had a one-day educational discussion about Indigenous peoples' right to self-determination in theory and in practice. These kinds of discussions can be really mentally tiring, especially if you're having problems with different languages. Because it was held in Indonesia, so there were more Indonesian participants, but most of them, they do not speak English. So it was quite a bit difficult. So it was, at the end of the day, it was not easy to tell whether the participants really appreciated the discussions, although it really was a fruitful discussion. So we were left wondering if they appreciated the the discussions. But then on the next day, everybody showed up and joined this huge people's protest against the World Trade Organization, and everybody was there under the banner of IPMSDL. And then we had Jacob from Indonesia to speak during the program representing the IPMSDL. So it was inspiring, and it was really good to see IPMSDL visible once again in a huge international action that was not just Indigenous peoples. Actually, we were just a few in number, the Indigenous peoples in that protest, but we were able to register our voice as IPMSDL. Yep, those were some of my many memories.
Thanks, Bess. Jitan, would you like to go next?
Yes, there are many events and also many processes where IPMSDL is involved heavily. But some of the most important involvement of activities of IPMSDL is to do a lot to do with the community visits and also supporting communities struggle for their land rights. I try to remember because even several fact-finding missions in the Philippines, for example, and also even in some other community solidarity visits in Malaysia, for example, and also in Indonesia, where we were able to not just get exposure to the challenges confronted by indigenous community, like among the Dayak community in Indonesia, for example, Kalimantan, or even in the Philippines. No? And I think those are really, really important because we not that we are able to understand what is happening with the community, but also able to extend solidarity with many of the indigenous community, that confront land grabbing and other human rights violation. No? In the case of West Kalimantan, for example, in the case of several parts of the Philippines, and even in Malaysia, no? In Sabah, for example, where we are able to get exposure and also to understand better on the realities and daily struggles of the indigenous community in Sabah, for example. Another significant moment when it comes to the IPMSDL is also the extension of support and also the mobilization here in our part of the world, no? Like in northeast part of India. I remember where IPMSDL is directly involved and also supporting the mobilization, like in Sikkim, for example. We were able to organize a series of community meetings and also the larger couple of training program on indigenous rights. Where we are also able to support the campaign against large dam in Sikkim. Like in India's Northeast, one of the biggest campaign and challenges of pursuance of large dam in our rivers, the effect of forests and so the direct involvement of IPMSDL in the community campaign and also advocacies against large and sustainable and destructive projects, and I think those are really, really significant. So our strength, IPMSDL strength, lies not only in the direct involvement at the larger process, but also in supporting communities within communities now, and then of course we keep on hearing and also directly involved in the campaign for rights and self-determination in West Papua. So those are really, really very strong initiatives. And finally, the IPMSDL's very critical engagement with some of the international process, like when it comes to COP26, the climate change, when it comes to sustainable development, or even in promoting a just development, on effective development cooperation, for example. And I think those are really, really powerful and very effective engagement, which has a very strong and very meaningful impact on communities worldwide. And so those are processes that we can still build up and strengthen further. But so those are some of the memories, some of the striking events, both within the community and also at the larger level. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing those, Beth and Jiten. Celestine, would you like to share your favorite or most memorable campaign activity with IPMSDL?
Well, apart from the launch at Baguio in 2010, I was part of the Rio karaoke event that Bestan talked about, and I think all eyes were on IPMSDL that day in Brazil. All eyes, because of a very unique way that our people dressed from different ethnic nationalities. They dressed differently and almost caused a stampede in Brazil because of the measure with which we were, ready to, let people hear our declaration that was made at karaoke. The road to karaoke was not easy because it was very far from Rio. It took us quite some. No, it wasn't easy, but when we came back, it was a scene to behold. And I don't want to dwell more on that because Bestan has said. But subsequent activities that are attended in Kenya, especially with the People's Coalition for Food Sovereignty, made possible by the IPMSDL, even CSO development effectiveness that they designed. And so it was because of IPM that we actually, I became part of several of those programs, and I remember that I brought in several leadership of ethnic nationalities. Reverend Mubasi, very strong climate comrade voices of very strong activists into this. And but I don't know what happened, and we disconnected. It was just, yeah, it was because Movement for the Survival of Ogoni people had Saro Piagbara became the president of MOSOP, so he was representing most of the voices of Ogoni people. So the Ogoni Solidarity Forum that I led had a disconnect, from the system until he finished his tenure now, and I reconnected. However, I've been in touch with Jiten throughout all this period. Jiten and myself have been communicating. Beverly, once in a while, hello, but I think it was just few months ago, precisely from July, that I started active communication, and I think that I was also part of the New York side event that we did at the university, York University. I think the University of New York. We did an event. That was also very colorful in drawing attention, to issues of common concern to indigenous ethnic groups all over. That was also an event that I can't, easily get out. I think I made a speech at the New York University that time and did presentation in the city. So those are the few activities and events that I've been part of. I know that we had that disconnect because of the period where Saro Piagbara had sway at the MOSOP, the Movement for the Survival of Ogoni People, the president. So he I guess, attended some of the programs on behalf of the Ogoni people. Yeah.
Thanks, Celestine. And lastly, of course, our global coordinator, I'm sure, has a lot of memories to speak about or experiences. So Beverly, share us your two or one or two of your favorite.
Well, I think, if we're talking about the IPMSDL and going back to November, the two very significant events would be, as we mentioned, the setting up of the international IPMSDL. And the second was actually the declaration of November 10 as International Indigenous Peoples Heroes Day. So we are not only celebrating the 11th year of IPMSDL, we are also celebrating at this time the 11th year of giving honor to our heroes, living and the dead, through the declaration of November 10 as International Indigenous Peoples Heroes Days, which also coincides with the death of Ken Saro-Wiwa and the other Ogoni martyrs. I remember Celestine was quite emphatic with this resolution. And we are glad that through the years, IPMSDL has expanded, and even also the recognition of November 10 has also expanded to other Indigenous peoples' heroes. So, for me, that's what would make it memorable. And I think the third part would be still being able to keep in touch with the members. Then, Celestine appears not to have changed, no, but it has already been a decade. I wonder why the changes in terms of age appears quite physical. But I don't know what's with Jiten and Celestine. You seem to have not aged, and you look the same 10 years ago. I think even for Besta, she looks the same 10 years ago. But I think I'm the only one that looks different. I look older than 10 years now. These are things, though. But what is nice is that we have also gained more friends. As we have mentioned, we had the opportunity to visit different Indigenous peoples communities, not only in in the Philippines and in Asia. And we hope to expand more in Latin America and the Caribbean, and of course in Africa, outside of outside of Nigeria and Kenya. So this time we will have to necesito aprender español for the secretariat. We need to learn to speak Spanish because se hablar is poquito, no? We cannot really do much if we are limited to our own local language and English, and maybe later on, I don't know, Celestine will also have to learn a bit of French to be able to connect with the Francophone areas of Africa. I think, so the campaign would revolve, for me, that would be memorable, aside from land, and that brought me to different areas like in Kautuli, in Burma, in the Sarayaku areas, in the middle of the Amazon. We've also been to the mountains of Guatemala. And Diwa and I, we were also fortunate that prior to the lockdown, we were able to go to West Papua. No? And all of this would involve not only trainings and discussions on Indigenous people's rights, but also specific trainings on how to do documentation so that we will have enough information, we would have enough, let's say, evidence when we do our lobby, when we do our engagements with national, regional, and international mechanisms. So for me, that's something that I hold very dear. Well, of course, it's something also personal to me, and sometimes I get so emotional about it. In 2014, we started with me alone, and then later on, how many years from now, I'm glad that we have Diwa, and then Paul, and we have Hara, and then we have Dang, and then now we have a wider pool of volunteers, no, doing a lot of our work, and that was also enabled us to also do more, no, not only in terms of just being secretariat of IPMSDL, is that we have been also serving as volunteer secretariat of several international formations, like we have mentioned the Commission 10 on Indigenous Peoples, National Minorities, and Oppressed Nations and Peoples. We have the Merdeka Network. We are doing that also. I mean, several, and for that, I am also thankful to the present Global Secretariat and the volunteers of IPMSDL. So back to you, Diwa. I would like to say more, but probably, I don't know, we'll run out of time. So you'll have to do another interview for all of us.
Nice to remember all these big moments, but also the little things like getting to meet and work with new people who would become lifelong friends, comrades, who do not age, perhaps because the struggle makes us young. Maybe that's it. And of course, learning about new community. I only learned about West Papua when I joined IPMSDL, so just a few years back. So there's just so much great memories with IPM. So of course, these achievements are not without hardships, and especially for a movement that seeks to position itself with one of the most marginalized and, let's say, sometimes minoritized or overlooked minority sectors, the Indigenous peoples. What do you think now has been one of the most challenging parts of keeping IPMSDL's work going throughout the years? So let's do another round again with Jitan. Start with Jitan.
Yeah, what keeps, thank you very much, Diwa. What keeps alive is our spirit and also our commitment and also determination to keep our people's right, and also to ensure people's right, and also to assert our self-determination, and also to ensure that our land, our resources, and our, and our land itself is handed over to our next generation in a way that they are able to take better care of it as well. So, which means we need to really confront and resist a lot of the challenges that we are confronting, when it comes to defending our land. So, which means the issues around the very aggression, development aggression, and also the very factors, neo-colonialism, imperialism, and whatever, all sort of onslaught that threatens our very survival as people. So we have very surmounting challenges, but our own passion, our own spirits, and our own people's struggles and resistance is what that keeps our struggles alive, and as an IPMSDL, we should strive further to strengthen this determination and this commitment to keep our struggles alive, to defend our land, to assert our rights as peoples, and also to foster stronger solidarity, not just within the different communities in our part of the world, but also with other indigenous communities all around. And so in the coming years, we should strengthen IPMSDL, and we should force a stronger international solidarity among all the different indigenous communities all around. Yeah. So long live international solidarity, and long live people's struggle, indigenous people's struggles.
So, Bess, maybe you could, since Jitan already shared with us, like how we keep going despite the challenges, maybe you can go through a little about these challenges that we are speaking of working as an IPMSDL.
Yeah, I do think that a constant challenge for IPMSDL, as in any other organization, especially international organizations or networks, would be how IPMSDL would support or respond to the many issues faced by its members that are taking place all at the same time, simultaneously. And then at the same time, how IPMSDL members would still contribute in keeping the network alive, because each of us are busy with our local, the day-to-day threats that we face in relation to our defense of our lands, and especially our human rights, because as always, and especially at this time, like for instance, in the Philippines, those who are defending land rights from development, aggression, like destructive projects, we are the ones that are being targeted by the state to be silenced through extrajudicial killings, criminalization, and various forms of human rights violations. So sometimes it may be difficult for indigenous peoples who are members of IPMSDL to respond, for instance, to the activities of IPMSDL, or even to promptly communicate, when there's so much on the table, and then there's this international network called IPMSDL. It can be quite a lot also, especially for those who are facing a lot of issues on the ground. But at the same time, it is something that IPMSDL has taken on, this challenge to keep its members involved in whatever ways, so that the IPMSDL and its member organizations always have to try to continue engaging each other, finding appropriate ways to keep the work of IPMSDL grounded, meaning to respond to the situations on the ground. And for those on the ground who are for those on the ground to be the active players in the campaigns and activities of the IPMSDL. So it's both ways, no? And as we can see, it's been 11 years. And I think IPMSDL has been growing in its membership all throughout those 11 years, in its programs and activities. So on this score, IPMSDL has been successful despite all those challenges that we face.
So indeed, IPMSDL works at a global scope. So we get the opportunity also to work with organizations at different levels. And some of these organizations are big names, or those with relatively more established or wider presence across the globe. So with this, being able to work with these types of organizations or institutions, what do you think defines IPMSDL, or as Bastang said earlier, IPMSDL's trademark? Or what is something new that IPMSDL brings or adds to the global IP advocacy for land rights, human rights, together with all other IP, tribal, and ethnic organizations? So, Celestine, what do you think that is for you?
Well, first I want to respond to one of the views from Beverly that that I'm still looking the same as I was. Yeah, Beverly, I don't eat I don't eat white man food. I don't eat burgers. I don't eat.
Okay, I don't
eat local food. I eat local food. Local food does not have this cholesterol, does not make you look big, and it keeps you in shape. And we wake up and take our local gin. We don't drink this gin brew by the white people. So we eat only local food, only local food. So and that's
local
it.
food
So
and local
maybe
wine.
you need to change.
Sugarcane and rice wine and rice wine.
So Beverly, when you travel, please take your local meals and you'll be okay.
Okay, nice advice.
Okay, yeah. Definitely, yeah. Like Jiten said, no, there have been challenges. There have been challenges, but we always think that a people united can never be defeated. So I think that's one thing, that IPM DSM is bringing to the table. That the problem you have is not only your own problem. That collectively, we share your problem. I think that collectivity in sharing one's problem. The IPM DSL takes Ogoni problem as if it was a problem of everybody. The country where I come from, when they hear something from outside, they respect a lot. So most of the sharing of information about the Ogoni struggle that IPM DSL is sharing is helping to solve our own problem. Although nothing much has changed, but what they bring to the table has helped us to keep our oil under the soil. Ogoni is the only place in the Niger Delta, Nigeria, where Shell, as hydra-headed and wicked that they are, was kicked out and has not been able to come back to take oil. In spite of pressure, there have been tremendous pressure on us to resume oil operation every day. But because of that voice of IPM DSL, I think that we have a hope in them. This Heroes Day, Heroes Week of action that they put together is not a local agenda, it's an international agenda. It reverberates all over the world. Every country of the world had an embassy. From Nigeria, they have an ambassador, and they hear and see and communicate to the president, say, hey, this is going to matter. You have to be careful, because everywhere they are celebrating this. It's another very great support, to our program, to amplify our voices all over the world. We don't take it for granted. And I know that in the coming year, all the legitimate demands of the Ogoni people as enshrined in the Ogoni Bill of Rights, I think we need to share it with the group and see what we can do to begin to address them one by one. Because the issue of political marginalization and oppression of our people is still there. The issue of politically motivated killings are still there. I think that now that I'm back fully to this family, I think the next coming year, I will take advantage of the privileges and opportunities the group, the movement provides. I will take advantage of that to further advance our own struggle and further amplify our voices in order to solving some of the problems that we have. But number one is the forceful resumption of oil operation is the one that we are going to fight, because the land has a way of regenerating, recuperating, and that's what we have been experiencing. So coming now to come and take the oil again, we further put pepper in a bleeding wound, and we do not want it. We do not want it at all, because hunger is in our land, poverty is there, nothing much has changed. So I think we will benefit more from the activities of this movement in the coming years, because the attempt to forcefully resume oil operation in Ogoni is very high. The government it is the highest oil deposit in Nigeria. And you don't need to go to the creek or ocean to get it. You don't go offshore. Our oil is in our premises, school premises, in our homes, on our farms. Very easy to get and very costly. They call it street crude. So we will need this movement to help us to amplify our voices. We will launch serious campaign to make sure that government should first clean up their mess, because they've just kick-started cleanup in Ogoni. Let them clean. They said it will take 25 to 30 years to clean up. So why are you in a hurry to want to resume our operation when you are just about kick-starting the cleanup? You cannot turn on the tap and claim to be sweeping water from the floor and the tap is flowing. That is deceptive. And I think I'm happy that we are back on the table and we can both take on the government of Nigeria and the oil companies. Thank you.
Thank you, Celestine. And Bev?
Well, I think I will agree, with Celestine, with Bestang and Jiten. We are IPMSDL. And I think what makes us different from others, we have been saying earlier on that we have a very long name: International Indigenous Peoples Movement for Self-Determination and Liberation. Very long name, and even the acronym is quite long. You'll run out of breath saying it. But I think it's because what's behind the name. I think it's the clear critique that we have in relation to neoliberal policies. It's a clear position against imperialism that's the core, of the issues and problems of indigenous peoples. It's not simply an issue of colonization and decolonization. It's not simply an issue of violation of land rights, but it's actually how imperialism dominates over indigenous peoples in relation to assertion of our rights to land and self-determination. I think that's one that would probably make us different, and that will also make us stronger. Two, if I'm not mistaken, we're so far the only global organization or network that is also of indigenous peoples that is based in the global south, based in the Philippines. That's something that we are proud of, because it's also based in one of the stronger or longest movements of indigenous peoples in the region and in the whole world. But maybe in the coming years, we will have to develop on trying to bring in other nationalities, other indigenous peoples outside of the Philippines to be part of our global secretariat, or even in our existing governing body, such as the board. And I think one that also makes this quite different is our base, our focus on communities or grassroots organizations. That's why I think, despite sometimes we lose connections with others for whatever reason, as Celestine has mentioned, or even with GTEM, because some of us have been either incarcerated for some time or who remain in jail sometimes. In a way, we lose contact, or there are certain changes in leadership in our own organizations. But because of the commonalities or the common analysis that we have, we are able to reconnect. I mean, as Celestine mentioned, we have been out of touch for quite some time, and then we're able to reconnect. And we were able not only to reconnect, but be able to continue our work with more spirit and militancy. And it's because of this probably connection with the ground, connection with communities, that also enable us to be able to do networking with other organizations. So we've mentioned the forming of Merdeka West Papua Support Network, and more recently we have been part of this new Asia and Pacific network of environmental defenders. And now we are also establishing new connections with new organizations, especially of the youth. So because now we have a resurgence of the youth, not only on indigenous people's issues, but in almost all the issues. Like we've seen in COP26, the youth were very, very active in relation to climate change. So I think these are things that make us different, and that makes us continue. And within the next 5 years, I think as a fearless forecast, if you don't mind me saying, Diwa, would be we look to a stronger, building a stronger IPMSDL, and maybe within the next 5 years, we will be able to have our first global assembly, and maybe that would be an mechanism, method for us to have the reunion that we very much need, not only because of the pandemic, but of course it has been quite some years, so it will need a face-to-face gathering wherein we are able to discuss more the directions that we want for IPMSDL. So again, congratulations everybody, and still we are IPMSDL. So back to you, Diwa.
Thank you, Bev. You've actually summed up the segment, and we will be hearing more of those fearless forecasts in the next part of the episode. But before that, we are going into another break for another round of solidarity messages from our friends. And again, reminding everyone to comment on our social media live streams and use the hashtags Indigenous Voices and hashtag IPMSDL11. Then selected messages will win this amazing shirt and some publications from our library. So now let's watch these video greetings.
Congratulations on your 11th anniversary, IPMSDL. 11 years of serving the people is no mean feat in a situation where the human rights is not respected. Cordillera Alliance Hong Kong, as well as Defend Cordillera Campaign PH Hong Kong, is one with you in the struggle for our right to self-determination and the protection of our ancestral lands. We unite as one for a stronger fight in this struggle. Again, Agbiag ti Cordillera.
Kabataan para sa Tribong Pilipino expresses its gratitude and solidarity to International Indigenous Peoples Movement for Self-Determination and Liberation, or IPMSDL, for its 11 years of commitment to land rights, life, and justice. Katribo Youth has worked closely with IPMSDL to assert the rights of the indigenous peoples at the international community, and we have witnessed their passionate, disciplined, and unwavering work amidst the pandemic and the crackdown against the national minority advocates in the Philippines. Through IPMSDL's initiatives, members of Katribo Youth were made aware of the plight of other indigenous peoples groups across the globe, making us now, more than ever, a solidified movement against state-fueled oppression. As an organization comprised of the youth and students, we continue to learn and get inspired from the victories IPMSDL has. Again, we are one with the rest of the community in celebrating the 11 militant years of IPMSDL.
Salam adil dan lestari, saya Bayu Harinata dari Eksekutif Daerah Walhi Kalimantan Tengah mengucapkan selamat kepada Gerakan Masyarakat Adat Internasional untuk Penentuan Nasib Sendiri dan Pembebasan atau IPMSDL untuk kerja-kerja selama 11 tahun ini dalam memperjuangkan masyarakat adat dan wilayahnya. Harapannya IPMSDL terus berjuang dalam komitmen dan agenda pengakuan dan perlindungan wilayah kelola masyarakat, khususnya masyarakat adat, sehingga dapat menciptakan keadilan untuk menentukan nasib sendiri dan pembebasan kepada masyarakat adat. Salam adil dan lestari.
Commission 1 of the International League of People's Struggle extends its warm congratulatory wishes to the International Indigenous Peoples Movement for Self-Determination and Liberation on its 11th year of existence among myriads of groups and organizations. Commission 1 of the ILPS is fighting for the cause of national liberation, democracy, and social liberation against imperialism and all forms of reaction. In its resolution in the last ILPS Assembly held June 23 to 26, 2019, Commission 1 called the people of the world to resolutely wage mass struggles against all forms of U.S. military aggression and intervention worldwide. We call for protests against the imposition of exploitative bilateral and multilateral economic agreements and other similar forms of neoliberal dictates. We call the people of the world to support the just struggles for national liberation in the underdeveloped countries and to support the countries asserting national sovereignty against imperialism. We are inspired that the oppressed within the imperialist countries themselves are fighting back against austerity, war, and fascism. We, the people, have nothing to lose but our chains. We have a world to win. Let us march forward and seize it. The call of Commission 1 is extended to member organizations of the IPMSDL, which have banded together on issues related to their struggle against foreign incursions into their ancestral domain, vast plantations devoted to crops intended for exportation, plunderous large-scale mining or deforestation that have destroyed their once fertile land and forests, militarization and killing of indigenous peoples leaders who are assertive and unflinching for the right of their people for self-determination. Commission 1 encourages the IPM-SDL to work together with us in order to be linked with the broadest, progressive, anti-imperialist movement, not only for their liberation as a group of people with its own set of tradition, culture, and way of life, but for the life and death struggle for liberation of all the people in a given country and the more arduous but truly liberating process for social liberation. A system to ensure democratic participation of all sectors of society and social justice for all, so that they may collectively enjoy the fruit of their collective labor. Long live the IPMSDL, long live international solidarity.
Hi, I'm Elvira Rumkabu from West Papua. I'd like to congratulate IPMSDL for the 11th anniversary. Well, words are not enough to describe the loyalty, commitment, and hard work that have been given by the IPMSDL to the struggle of the indigenous peoples. And especially here with us in West Papua, I'd like to thank you, IPMSDL, for being such a strong alliance in the region. Thank you for giving us spaces to bring our cause and bring our voices. Thank you for the networking and also for all of the hard work in ensuring that our struggle can be heard everywhere. Keep up the excellent work, and again, happy anniversary IPMSDL.
Salam kebebasan. Saya Martin Mangkapro, aktivis Facebook, bersama masyarakat adat bangsa Papua Barat. Kami mengucapkan selamat merayakan HUT ke-11 tahun International People Movement for Self-Determination and Liberation, IPMSDL. Semoga di usia yang ke-11 ini semangat solidaritas untuk melakukan perubahan-perubahan demi penentuan nasib sendiri dan kebebasan masyarakat adat internasional di mana saja berada di seluruh dunia, memperoleh hak-hak atas tanah tempat di mana saja berada. Kita wujudkan kebebasan bagi setiap suku bangsa di seluruh dunia. Terima kasih.
Happy 11th year anniversary to our friends and colleagues from the IPMSDL. Since we started our partnership, IPM has been championing the issues of the indigenous peoples and national minorities within CPDE and the policy spaces we are engaging. We are grateful to IPM for helping the CPDE Global Secretariat to lead and steer the platform towards our goal of promoting development effectiveness. Again, we congratulate IPM for this milestone, and we look forward to more years of partnership and cooperation for people-centered development. Padayon IPMSDL, long live international solidarity.
Thank you for those heartwarming messages. And now we are going to show our new IPMSDL logo, which I've actually been wearing this whole time. So I'll have to give a brief explanation. There it is being shared on the screen. So it comprises the symbol of the natural elements. The symbol of the sun at the center is known to many indigenous culture as the symbol of life-giving abundance, with its warmth radiating healing and peace. The three mountains symbolize constancy, stillness, and firmness of indigenous culture and struggle. It also indicates that a journey had been made across a challenging range. The blue flowing water signifies the connection of lands and spirits. For many indigenous peoples, it also shows the dimension of purification, protection, and healing. And all these represent the life the indigenous peoples around the world are struggling to defend. The torch represents the torch in the letter I, represents the continuation of the struggles of our ancestors and for the generations to follow. And we retained the same color scheme from our first logo and updated it with the more vibrant tones for the vibrant future that we aspire. So amazing new look for IPMSDL with this fresh looking logo. A big thanks, of course, goes to Miss Jennifer Padilla. She is a Filipina visual artist and IP advocate who designed and created this new logo. In her work, she created a new face while maintaining the essence of our mandate. And thank you again to the heartwarming greetings that we had watched earlier. And you're still tuned in to a special episode of Indigenous Voices in celebration of IPMSDL's 11th anniversary. Before we proceed to the last part, let me read just some few messages again that we got from social media. So Isa says, happy anniversary IPMSDL, and Romeo also greets us happy anniversary. So thank you, Isa and Romeo. We've done our throwbacks, we've looked through the highlights in a decade of IPMSDL work. Now let's look ahead to our guests. What are the things that you wish to see from IPMSDL in the coming years? Or give us, like what Beverly said, her fearless forecast about IPMSDL. So let's start now with Bestang.
Okay. Yeah, well, in the not so far future, I would like to imagine a vibrant global network of indigenous peoples, an IPMSDL that has a very powerful voice, that it is not easily ignored by anybody. Okay, so, well, of course, this can only happen if we all continue to advance the struggles of indigenous peoples. If we support the global network of indigenous peoples, that is the IPMSDL, and if we continue to strengthen our unity and solidarity to fight for indigenous people's rights and a good future for the next generations of the earth. We may physically look not too far from what we looked like 11 years ago, as Celestine said. I wish that's really true. but yes, we are not growing any younger. So I hope in the future there would be more active members of IPM SDL from the youth. No, so yes, I'd like to say happy anniversary to IPM SDL and long live international solidarity.
Sorry, muted. How about you, Jiten?
Yes, in the coming years and days ahead, it's really, really important that we bring in more a strengthened voice of indigenous communities and across indigenous nations, not just from Asia or Africa, but then it will be really good if we can strengthen and intensify our effort to ensure that we have other indigenous nations from other regions as well in the moment IPMSDL movement, and also I also look forward to IPMSDL able to respond more to the community challenges, and also to the larger challenges within the communities, so that we have not just a strengthened voice and participation from the communities from different indigenous nations, but also the ability of IPMSDL to also to respond to the community challenges as well. And I also endorse what Bestang just said earlier, that we look forward to a more stronger leadership, especially coming in from the youths as well in IPMSDL. And with that, we look forward to more strengthened solidarity and also more unity among all the different indigenous communities who are taking part in the IPMSDL. So long live international solidarity, and looking forward to more unified and more strengthened solidarity among all the indigenous communities.
Thank you. And Celestine?
Oh yeah, for me, I think I would like to see the Indigenous Peoples constituency becoming very strong in international fora. That we become a force to reckon with at every international gathering, because there are indigenous people all over the world. So our presence must be felt in every meeting and every gathering. And like others have said, we need to go back home to bring more ethnic nationalities, indigenous groups, and bring up younger people that will take over from us. Because even if we are growing older physically or not, we need to give way to younger people. It is not good to see one face all the time. So definitely, we need to begin to bring in for me, on my own, I'm bringing in young people. And I know that it won't be long from now, we will see quite a lot of other indigenous ethnic nationalities from the place where I come from that we feature in our activities. So I want to see a bigger, larger, stronger, well-informed community of indigenous people that we work together to further push forces against our common enemy. Yeah, that's what I'll say.
Thank you.
So long live our struggle.
Long live. Expansion and growth, definitely. And Bev, do you have something to add from what you said earlier? You're muted.
Yes, I'm sorry. I'm mute. I was muted. Well, there are still many things to do, no? And I think I would like to see a more active members of the IPMSDL, not only expanding the membership, but a more active leadership, a more active membership, because without that, I don't think we will really reach far enough, for IPMSDL. And a more united IPMSDL, because the enemies of indigenous peoples, the enemies of the oppressed peoples are strong. And probably what makes us stronger than them is our united position, our united actions in confronting them. So that's something that I look forward to. And of course, I look forward really, for me, probably I would really like to have within the next 5 years a face-to-face meeting of IPMSDL, no? I mean, that would be probably in our 15th year anniversary, we'll be able to have something like that. And I don't know if we can do it in Nigeria or we can do it in Manipur, because we haven't been to Nigeria and Manipur yet. So we can do both, no? Let's see the mountains and the rivers of Manipur, and also see the vibrant movement of the Ogoni people, and also probably have a face-to-face tribute
Yeah, I would like to.
to
I
the
would like to see
descendants
that.
of Kensaro Wiwa. So let's
Yes,
work for
yes,
that,
yes.
no, Celestine, everybody. Wiwa.
Yeah, those are all indeed. We are all looking forward to those. So we've come to our closing. Bev, would you like to give final messages for our viewers?
I think we've said a lot, no? But I'd like to thank everybody. I mean, especially to Bestang and to Jiten and to Celestine for spending time with us in this anniversary celebration of IPMSDL. It is really good, no, to see that you are here with us. At the same time, I'd like to say thank you to the Global Secretariat, who has been doing multiple tasks for several years now, as volunteers even. So that's something that I think that's a very, very, that needs to be given recognition, because without the Global Secretariat also assisting, we would not have reached what we have achieved so far. And of course, to all our advocates who remain despite the attacks, despite the false charges against us, still remain to be with IPM SDL. So in behalf of the officers, members, and the Board of Trustees of the IPM SDL, thank you very much. And as a last word, indeed, there's no other way to honor our ancestors. There's no other way to honor our heroes, the living and the dead, but to live out their legacy in defense of land, self-determination, and freedom. So long live IPMSDL, long live international solidarity. Thank you.
And there we have it. That's a wrap. Thank you to our guests, Bestang, Jitan, Celestine, and Beverly. And happy 11th anniversary to the IPMSDL. But of course, before we close, I think many of our viewers are also waiting for who gets our shirt.
We get. Do we get a free shirt? The four of us?
Yes, everyone here gets a shirt. Thank you. So those who commented and tweeted their messages and reminisced with us, the lucky winners of our shirts and publications are, so we have four. So we have Gail, who commented on Facebook, Isa and Romeo, who commented on Facebook, and Mara, probably on one of our other social media accounts. So please wait for the Secretariat to reach out to you on how to claim your gifts, and check your inboxes in the next few days. So IPMSDL is 11 years strong and still pushing forward, and it will continue to do so until the rights of Indigenous peoples are genuinely realized. And maybe then Indigenous peoples wouldn't have to be fighting for rights that IP should be enjoying in the first place. And this has been another educational and beautiful episode of Indigenous Voices. And it wouldn't have been the same without our guests and the viewers, people watching and sharing. And to all our viewers, you can actually team up with us for the next episodes of Indigenous Voices. Come on over and talk. We'll talk about IP situations and issues around the world, how we can build this movement, and other things. And all our allies are invited. If you are part of an Indigenous group, you're a community leader, an activist, an advocate who performs, makes music, create poetry, you can just simply send us a message. We can come up with creative topics to advocate for IP rights. So send us a message on Facebook, Twitter, or our email, info@ipmsdl.org, and we'll be glad to hear your voice. So there you have it. And see you again on the next episode of Indigenous Voices. Again, this is Diwa from the IPMSDL Global Secretariat, and you are watching IPMSDL's Indigenous Voices. linking voices, building solidarity. Happy anniversary.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Happy anniversary.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Nice
Thank
meeting
you.
Bye, everyone.
Nice
Good night.
to see
Have a
you,
nice day.
Lieutenant
Celestine.
Celestine, you should
Yes,
have
thank
the
you.
rice wine when
Yay.
we get
Bestang,
to
Beverly, Ken, Paul.